Batman is one of the most popular superheroes of all time, with many depictions over the years. Last year's rendition of the Batman, Caped Crusader, acted as a spiritual successor to the original Batman the Animated Series. During the release of the series, it has found major controversy on the depictions of its characters, as the gender and race swapping brings up debate on the depiction of its mythos. Several traditionally white characters are reimagined as racialized depictions. On paper, this may be seen as progressive representation, but it harms the people they're trying to represent. It questions if the change of race actually matters to the story. Does it affect the actions of villains and heroes in the show? The show avoids a strong position on the race and crime relationship to not alienate its audience. As we move forward into the video, I will analyze this race and crime dynamic and how this show fails to represent it in a meaningful way. Unlike common perceptions of the superhero franchise, it's not always about big, flashy fights. A large part of it is, but with the Marvel and DC movies establishing it as this big spectacle, this becomes a common consensus. But in the comics, they do tackle social issues with the X-Men representing marginalized groups in its storytelling, or more recently with the Absolute Batman series fighting white supremacists. With many different issues over the years, it puts the superhero franchise in a particular position. Unlike most other forms of stories, superheroes have multiverse comics where they can exist outside of the main continuity and tell different stories that deviate from the main timeline. As such, changes can happen to their visual appearance. We can see through Marvel's Nick Fury, who is played by Samuel L. Jackson, when his comic book counterpart is normally depicted as white, and Bane, who is played by Tom Hardy in The Dark Knight Rises, when Bane is Latino. Despite these changes, their depictions have received positive reviews. So what makes them different compared to the show? It was the intention that was behind these decisions, as the race swapping never affected the plot in a negative way, because race didn't matter to their character. In combination with the lack of awareness of the comics and them being popular actors, they are judged on their merit, and those actors do a very good job, and it's very faithful to the source material. However, race does matter in the Batman Caped Crusader. In introducing the character of Jim Gordon, it is implied that he was made commissioner, so the mayor is not viewed as racist.
Gordon.
The freaking front page!
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I saw the paper.
So what are you doing about it?
Sir, we're doing
Because I thought I was very clear that catching this masked freak is your top priority!
Yes, and it's got our full attention. I have everyone out on the street.
I want good headlines, Gordon. Wasn't that the whole point of you in that job? Good press?
Sir, we'll catch him.
Despite this, it doesn't really change any of his actions and principles compared to his white counterpart. As the show is depicted in the 1940s, a set of issues occurred at the time, nothing mentioning the existence of World War II or even Jim Crow laws, which would restrict his movement because these laws reinforce racial segregation. Of course, this is fictional America and does not need to be one-to-one with real life. But why have the setting be 1940s if nothing changes besides the technology? Fiction needs to be grounded in its established norms for believability, as throughout the episodes you see corruption in the system and the major wealth inequality in Gotham. So how can one problem exist but not the other? You can argue that they're more progressive than our world when it's okay for two characters to have an openly lesbian relationship. But Jim Gordon is functionally the very first black commissioner in America. How does that change his actions when he can perpetuate more discrimination towards his own race, when he's finally in a position of power to actually make a difference in the system? Additionally, we can get reasons for Arnold Flass's motivation, who was originally depicted as white. Besides just being a corrupt god, what are his motivations beyond the power? He acts as a form of social control to keep the mob in higher positions of power, as he's willing to let an arsonist burn a marginalized community for the sake of attempting to capture Batman. It shows a clear divide when anyone in any positions of power is predominantly white. If race never mattered in the first place, why change it, especially within the context of policing? There has been many cases where the authority has discriminated and used an unnecessary amount of force on black individuals. Was the race change simply just to pander to an audience like a wave of other properties have been for the last few years, diversity is important to understand different groups of people and challenge misconceptions, especially when for the longest time in media, films are predominantly a white cast. This is an overcorrection without any substance. To say race does not matter perpetuates the idea of racial blindness. It ignores that history has consequences and can reinforce the biases and stereotypes we have on people. It builds resentment towards minority groups because it reinforces the idea of prioritizing race swapping will result in a bad story. Looking at a quote for the reasoning to change the penguin to a woman, one of the creators of the show states that there is a need for more good female villains and that they never figured out the character of the penguin. He was made fun of as a child for his looks and thus became ruthless in the pursuit of respect he thought he deserved. But here, the penguin is meant to be seen as attractive and other characters flaunt over her. They fundamentally change a core aspect of the character in the show. And to say that there are not any good female villains is not true. The Batman mythos has a diverse cast of people, so why not use those characters instead? If they wanted to tell a story with black characters, they could have introduced Chase Fox, who becomes Batman, or Duke Thomas as Robin, who later becomes Signal. Changing the status quo will simply just upset people who read the original source material, which can be seen most apparent with the change to Harley Quinn's character. In this depiction, Harley Quinn does not become a villain through the Joker, which makes her lack any real reason or purpose to becoming Harley Quinn, as it was relatively sudden in her change with a slight hint alluding to it.
Just going through the motions, being the person that everyone around you expects you to be.
I'm just playing the field, Doc. That's not a character flaw, is it? Life is just different for people in my position.
Someone wealthy, you mean? I'm sure it is.
She kidnaps the elites of Gotham and punishes them for their supposed wrongdoing, and to psychologically manipulate them to give back to the people that they hurt. However, there's no real indicator to any sort of social factors that would lead to her criminal behavior. The dynamics of race, gender, and class affects your own experiences. She's shown to be in a loving relationship with Detective Montoya, is good friends with Barbara Gordon, and makes a good income as a therapist for the rich. How does intersectionality play a role in affecting her life? We see through other characters that women are still discriminated against. Since she is better off than most people as an Asian woman, why would she want to give that up? She doesn't have the same protective mechanisms as Bruce Wayne and would be stigmatized. An example is when Bruce is in an episode punches a guy. It was viewed as conflicted because it was about his dead parents and he got off with just going to Harley's clinic. At least with her main counterpart, you could see why she turned to crime. She was abused and manipulated to pursue the Joker. Most versions of her are chaotic and talkative, and this one has been reversed to a more cold and ruthless personality, focusing more in the psychology background of the character. Her character adds a social commentary on the elites, as in medieval times, gestures were used to make fun of people in positions of power. It would allow the opportunity to question Batman's position as a good cop. Is beating up bad guys enough to make a significant difference? It deviates so much from the original depiction that it's basically an entirely new character. By not fully fleshing out her character, it lacks any merit. The media plays an important role in defining what crime is to the public. Not giving complete characters can be seen as leftovers for marginalized communities, because rather than making an authentic character and stories that could be played by actors of color, it is just a lazy shortcut to diversity. Without proper representation, it can't challenge the preconceptions that people have. Part of this is likely due to the attention economy, where they need to drum up buzz and controversy to capture the attention of a wider audience. Batman is a property that many people grew up with, and having a more mature interpretation that tackles these themes is more relevant than ever, especially to an audience that might not engage with these issues. With an upcoming season 2, it can incorporate changes that better represents the group of diverse people.